This is Unique Smiles, the Facial Paralysis Podcast, and I'm your host, Brian April. Today on Unique Smiles, we are talking to supermom and stand-up comedian Georgia Kelley, who got facial paralysis due to acoustic neuroma. Georgia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
I've known you for, 3 years now? 4 years, something like that?
About 3 years, yeah.
Before, I guess, we get into it, let's tell everybody, what is acoustic neuroma?
Well, an acoustic neuroma is, its clinical name is vestibular schwannoma, and it is a non-cancerous brain tumor that sits on the 7th and 8th cranial nerve, which happens to be your facial nerve and your hearing nerve.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what led up to your diagnosis? What was going on in your life?
Okay, well, in 2008, I started on a very toxic divorce, and I was probably having symptoms during that time frame that I didn't feel them or I didn't notice them. And around 2009, actually, I started to feel some things that I didn't realize that they had to do with my physical health. And a couple of those things were, there was some pressure going up my head and up my back of my neck. And I would just kind of grab my head for a few seconds, and then it would kind of release. My eyesight hurt. It wasn't bad eyesight. It was just my eyes hurt. And then when I would get up out of bed, my body would kind of topple over to the wall, and so I was dizzy, and so those are the things that I started feeling. I also started to go deaf. Things were started to feel muffled on the left side of my ear, and I thought, I'm a single mom of 4 daughters, so I kept blaming them for their screaming. That's why I was going deaf. So, but what it was there was this tumor that had been growing.
So I guess the next question is, what was the diagnosis like? So what did you just go get an MRI, and that kind of revealed it?
Yeah, what happened was around late 2010, kind of the fall of 2010, my oldest daughter and I were watching Dancing with the Stars, and a Cymbalta commercial came on. And I was sitting there, and my daughter looked at me. She was about, I would say, 12 or 13 years old. And she looked at me and she goes, "Mom, are you depressed?" Because apparently the woman on the Cymbalta commercial looked a lot like I did. And I immediately started crying. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what's happening to me. That's what's wrong with me, is I'm depressed, because I was having these feelings of not being able to function pretty much. And again, I just kept putting it back on this toxic divorce that was continuing. It just never let go. It never let up. And it was just constantly in my face. And so I just put everything as stress. This is stress from this divorce. And so when she said that, it was kind of like a light bulb went on in my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed. Great. I'm going to go to the doctor. I've never been on anything before, but I'm going to get myself on something, and I'm going to get rid of this feeling. So I made an appointment with my primary care physician. I went in, and I said, I am depressed and I need to be put on something. And I said, this is what's going on in my personal life, and this is what physically is going on with me. And he looked at me, and thank God for him, because he just looked at me and said, before we put you on anything, I'd like to run some more tests. And so he sent me to a neurologist. He sent me to a ears, nose, and throat doctor. And then he sent me to an eye doctor. And eye doctor did my eyesight, and he said, well, your eyesight's not that bad. that if you want glasses, if you think it might help, we'll give them to you. Well, he got me glasses. I wound up losing them because they really didn't help. And then I went to I actually skipped over the ears, nose, and throat doctor and went right to the MRI or the neurologist. And the neurologist thought I had vertigo.
Yep.
He thought I had vertigo. And so he sent me home with this thing that I had to write down whenever I felt dizzy. Well, I was always feeling dizzy, especially when I woke up. If I woke up and my eyes were still closed, I would just grab onto my bed because the room was already spinning. And so that wasn't real helpful. But before I left the neurologist office, he said, let's do an MRI. So I had the number to call the MRI office and on my nightstand, and I never called. I just kind of went on with my life. And again, what was happening with my brain was I couldn't follow through with things. I'd look at my dishes piling up in the sink and just walk by them and think, I got to do those. Or I walk by the laundry room and go, oh, I gotta do laundry. And I just kind of kept walking by, and my cousin wound up coming to visit me and thought something's seriously wrong. So he wound up sending me out to go get donuts, and he wound up having my girls sort laundry and start the laundry, and he did my dishes. And so it was just a bizarre time. And so
a lot of people pay good money for that.
I know. Exactly. I'll give his number out later.
Yeah, there you go.
For hire. But so what happened was the MRI office called me, and they said, hey, we have this order here. Do you want to get this done? And I went, oh, yeah, I guess I do. And so we made the appointment for that Friday. They happened to have opening that Friday, and I knew I didn't have to work that day. So I went in, and they put me in the MRI machine, and the gal who was doing my MRI asked me what was going on, and I kind of told her, and so she slid me in this machine, and I wound up falling asleep, because that was the other thing that was happening, is I was falling asleep in really odd places, whereas I'm the type of person who never takes naps. I'm always on the go, and I wound up falling asleep in that horrible MRI banging and clanging, and they pulled me out, and I had put all my stuff in the locker, before they let me go in. And so she said, go ahead and get your stuff out of the locker. And she goes, why don't you have a seat in this room? And I thought it was like at the dentist, where they take your x-rays and they're like, hang on, they want to make sure it's all clear. So that's kind of what I was thinking. Oh, they're just going to make sure my scans are clear. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this doctor in his white coat walks by, and they said, that's her. And he looked at me, and he goes, Georgia? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh my gosh, you're so young. Well, I was 42 at the time, and I didn't know what that meant. And I just kind of looked at him weird, like, okay, thanks. Like I'd never seen this doctor. Well, this was December 17th. My neurologist was on vacation for the holidays. So he comes in and he says to me, he goes, you have a non-cancerous brain tumor. And I just sat there. And it was almost like the rest of him sounded like the teacher in the Charlie Brown Peanuts show. Wah, 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 wah. Mm-hmm. And I just sat there like, oh my gosh, a brain tumor? No, cancer or not, that sounds scary. And so he said, I want you to go home and relax the whole weekend, because this was a Friday. And he said, and if anything goes wrong, he goes, you go straight to Mission Hospital, where he had done his residency. And he goes, you start name dropping me, and you let them know you have an acoustic neuroma. Well, that scared me even more. And I happened to go to this appointment by myself. So he says, why don't you, he actually wound up calling USD and leaving a message for one of the people up there that he had worked with as well during his residency. And then he said, why don't you stay here? We're gonna go get your scans for you to take up to USC. And I was standing in the doorway of that room, And people kept walking, the staff would walk by, they were working, but I just felt like every time somebody would walk by, they knew, and they would kind of look at me like, poor girl, she's got a brain tumor. And I immediately just started crying, and that sweet MRI technician swooped me into the room and closed the door and held me tight, and she said, "Are you alone?" And I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and I was alone, and I felt alone, and I was going through this divorce, and it was scary, and I had these 4 little girls that I was supposed to be taking care of, and I was scared. I'll say that for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's such a life-changing, diagnosis, because again, like you said, you hear brain tumor or you hear whatever, you're like, whoa, what's that? Again, cancerous or not, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
And I'm assuming you just kind of went and thought the worst, like, thought.
Yes.
And how long did you have between your diagnosis and your surgery?
I was diagnosed on December 17th, and on January 4th, I had the surgery, and that's a whole nother side of the story of insurance. And I happened to just get a job at Wells Fargo Bank in September, and my insurance kicked in October, and then in November it was re-enrollment for January 1. And it's a whole nother story, but I have a daughter who has a heart condition, and so I decided to get the top of the line insurance that I could, just in case she had problems with her heart, for January 1, 2011. And little did I know that decision was made really for me.
Right.
Because January 4th, they rolled me in for brain surgery. So
you get to spend most of the holidays just freaking out.
Completely freaking out. Yeah. So it was mind blowing, and yet at the same time it was like, oh my gosh, okay, they told me after 40 your body goes to pot, right?
Yep.
Everything goes wrong, and so here my body was deteriorating from the brain tumor, but I thought it was just because I turned 40. So there was a little bit of relief that okay, so there is an answer to this. This isn't normal after 40.
No, definitely not.
Right. That definitely, the fear outweighed that relief, very much so.
Right.
And again, the unknown of what can happen in surgery, and it's just a scary feeling, and knowing these little girls were, looking to me.
How old were they at the time?
Let's see, they were.
Hate to
8.
ask your math.
I know, right? I have to deduct, subtract, multiply. They were 8, 10, 11, and 13.
Wow. So, yeah, pretty young.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious to see why you're freaking out. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't know what's going to happen. And so you had the surgery, and then
I did.
Did you wake up with full facial paralysis after that, or what? Where did you get your paralysis from?
Yeah, so they did the surgery, and they told me that facial weakness was a probability, as was losing the hearing in my left ear. And I woke up, and the left side of my face was completely paralyzed. And they didn't like me using that word. They kept saying weakness. I was like, it's not moving. This is paralyzed. And so I thought that it was really bizarre, because I was like, the assistant to the surgeon walked in, and she says, "How you doing? How's your hearing?" And I go, "Oh, I don't think I lost my hearing at all." And she picked up the phone on the hospital bed, and she put it to the left side of my face, and she goes, "Do you hear the dial tone?" And I just looked at her. I said, "No, I don't." And she goes, "Okay, it's gone." And that was it. I mean, there was no hope for that coming back. That was gone. So my ear rings nonstop, morning, noon, and night. But the facial paralysis, they had a clear patch on my eye, and it was paralyzed. And, talking was really difficult in the beginning. F's, P's, and B's were the worst. And
there goes all your swearing at the kids.
Right. No. All those swear words were out the door. People would just shake their head and look at me.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
No, totally. I love it. Exactly. So those were difficult. And yeah, so eating was difficult, talking was difficult, drinking was difficult. It just, your world just kind of spins out of control, and when you don't know if it's going to heal at all, if any, it's depressing.
So,
as you can relate to that, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely, I can. Absolutely, it just shatters your world.
Yeah,
it's like you have to mourn the loss of your old self, like
totally. Your face. I mean, you have to. You spend all these years getting used to the face that you were created with, right?
Right.
And not necessarily that we're thrilled with the face that we were created with. That, gosh darn it, you're used to it. Yep. Like 42, I was used to that face, and then it to me, I felt like it was taken away. My smile was taken away. The function of blinking and closing my eye is gone. And I remember actually feeling nauseated, like I was going to completely vomit because of just thinking about my eye not blinking and closing.
Yeah, I remember when I had mine, I just said, please just, I started making deals with myself. Like, okay, if my eye will close and
right.
my hearing comes back, I'll be cool.
Exactly.
Everything else can be a mess, whatever. It's not,
right. I'll forfeit my smile for my eye.
Exactly.
Totally. I went through the same thing.
It's so crazy. You start to, you just go, okay, let's just do this.
Yeah.
All right, I'll settle for this. And you just kind of pray that it happens. So
totally.
how did your kids react to you with it?
I call them, you call certain people your rock,
mm-hmm.
Or your foundation. I call them my little rock garden because there's 4 of them. And the first time they came to see me in the hospital, they'd gotten there just when the physical therapist had gotten there just a few minutes before them. And I was sitting in a chair. I had a Where's Waldo type beanie on my head to keep the hair off the scar. And I had this clear patch. The left side of my face is paralyzed. And I'm sitting in the chair, and the physical therapist is asking me to move my right foot and put it in front of my left foot. So like kind of heel to toe. And my kids were sitting over there to my right. And I was trying with all my might to move my foot in front, my right foot in front of my left foot. And I was literally just dragging it and like almost pulling my body, to try and get it to move. And I realized this had affected me greater than I had ever imagined. And I just looked over at my kids. Now I can laugh, but that I cry at the same time because the looks on their faces were like, oh my gosh, what happened to Mom? And I just looked at them and I thought, I got to do this. I got to do this. And so I just dragged that foot and I got it to the front. And I looked over at them. I smiled and my half crooked smiled and put my thumbs up like, it's going to be okay. And every day got better. Every day got better. But, and of course they were concerned and they were worried. And much later they told me about how worried they were, that at the time, they stayed strong for me, even in those young ages that they were. They knew that they had to be strong for me, and told me it was okay. And they would tell me how pretty I was and that I was the most beautiful person. And it was just so sweet. It was so sweet. And again, they were my rock garden.
Oh, that's awesome.
Through it all.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah.
I guess the other question I have is, did you have any additional surgeries for your face as far as your smile? Did you have like a static sling or anything like that, or the gracilis transfer?
Well, I did have a spring put into my eye to get that to close and blink. And that was a game changer for me. Because with it open, not all the time, but all the ways to lubricate your eye, mine were all paralyzed. So there was no moisture in there. Mm-hmm. And that it made my eye burn like nobody's business. It just hurt so bad. And I would actually blink, and I would use my left hand, my fingers, and to blink my eye. So I was constantly moving, So when the spring went in, not only did it give me some relief of it being constantly open with the air hitting it, I didn't have to constantly blink with my finger. And
so little sense of normal.
Totally. I mean, at the time, right before my eye surgery, I had to move from my home into an apartment, and the apartment was on the 3rd floor. And I remember just standing there, blinking my eye, blinking with my finger, and then grabbing the box and running up 3 flights of stairs before my eye would burn so bad to get it, and I had to use my finger to blink it again. And I did that move, and that was crazy. So to get that spring into the eye, to get it to close and blink, it was just, such a relief. And then I could look at the computer again. And that was it. That's the surgery that allowed me to go back to work, because I was on the computer all the time. And so that allowed me to get back to work after a year, after I healed from that. And so, yeah, that's the only surgery I've had. I have had some healing, which I'm so beyond grateful for. I would say I'm probably 80%. I'd love to go see Dr. Azizadeh and get partial of my smile a little bit back. But other than that, it's kind of where I'm at. It's my new normal, and I've had to learn to accept that and be grateful for where I'm at. I know a lot of other people don't get the healing that I've had, so I'm super grateful. Super grateful.
So what started to turn your frame of mind around? I'm sure you went through, the depression. Obviously, we all go through that.
Totally. Yeah.
But knowing you now, you're always out, you're always doing things, you're always, involved in things. What started to turn your frame of mind around from all of that? Was it just the spring, or was there more to it? Or
no, there was definitely more to it. I think the spring definitely was a physical thing that made it better, which of course leads to your emotional state as well. I do remember there was a night I literally wound up in a fetus position, sobbing, feeling like I had some sort of power over it, and that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing to heal myself. And I think that night I realized this was out of my control, and I had to let it go. I had to, or it was going to just, continue to take me down that downward spiral. And I started seeing a counselor, and she challenged me. She said, who is Georgia? What does Georgia like to do? And that kind of thing. And I guess in the course of a previous visit to her, I had talked to her that I had done some stage work, for acting and community theater, that kind of thing. And that I had said, 4 kids. There's no way I can commit to a rehearsal schedule. And she said to me, well, go this week. I want you to go find something for Georgia. And so I went directly to the community theater websites and thinking maybe there's something. And I found on that website, one of the websites, that there was a stand-up comedy class. And I just sat there and I stared at the screen. I thought, could I do this? Could I put myself back on stage? And so it was one time a week for 6 weeks, and so I jumped on it, and I joined it, and there I was on stage 6 weeks later, trying to make people laugh in the audience, and I got off the stage, and it blew me away. The confidence and the satisfaction, and just knowing that even with my facial paralysis, I was able to make people laugh, and even using some of the ailments, that I have to make people laugh. It turned everything. It turned everything, and embracing it rather than fighting against it really changed everything for me.
Absolutely makes 100% sense to me. Obviously, because I also do stand up, and that's how I started to get my healing, was through laughing at it. And
right,
very few people understand that feeling of being on stage and getting people to laugh, and just what that feels like. It's an indescribable feeling, and and you said it so well. And I always tell people, if you can laugh, and I say it from stage, if you can laugh about what's causing you pain, you take away the power it holds over you. And to me, that was the whole key. And I think people, like you said, embracing it and just not, fighting it or trying to run away from it, but just embracing it and just saying, okay, this is what it is, and I'm going to go on and do what I want to do. I think that's so important. And, I can only imagine, because I know what my experience was like, having done stand-up prior to my facial paralysis, and then going back and being like, I just remember how terrified I was that first night back. I can't
imagine.
Yeah, so I know how terrified I was the first night I ever did comedy, and then I know how
you had to go through it twice.
Yeah, even worse. I took a little break to heal, and then to go back and just was like, oh, can I do this? This is awful. This is are they gonna laugh? Are they gonna they're just gonna like point at me or whatever? And then I was at like an open mic, and I saw like the first 2 comics go up, and they were just so bad, and I was like, oh, I got this. I was like, okay,
I got this.
I have jokes. Okay, I'll be fine.
Exactly.
But that really made all the difference. So you're so brave and strong for doing that, and also crazy for doing stand-up, because
right. That's what I say. Yeah. When people say you're brave, nah, I'm just crazy.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things in stand-up that just has its own bag of mental issues. So you're just like,
Definitely.
You're inviting this to yourself. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, good. You're nuts.
Exactly. As we wind down, what advice do you have for people who are newly diagnosed with acoustic neuroma, or have just come down with facial paralysis?
My advice would be to, number one, get support, whether it's other people who have facial paralysis or just a really great support system around you. The support system I had was incredible. And I also did go to a handful of the facial paralysis support group in LA, and Brian, I've been to yours in San Diego as well. And I think it's just so important. Number one, just to have people to love and care for you. I know during the surgery time, people came out of the woodwork for me that had never experienced facial paralysis. But then later, to sit in a room with people with facial paralysis and to look around and go, oh my gosh, they get it. They get it. They understand what I'm going through. And I think that's important too. That's number one. Number two, you know, you're going to go through a time of sadness and depression and mourning that loss, and walk through it, but keep walking. Don't stop and camp there. Just keep walking and know that there's a purpose and there's a plan for everything. And even this, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, Brian, right now if this didn't happen to me, so I've met some incredible people, and that, I think that would be my best advice, is just get the support and keep walking. Don't stop, and move through it. There is life on the other side.
That's awesome. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story and your bravery, and I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hanging out with you again and doing some shows. And
definitely.
Is there social media or somewhere that people can follow you? If do you have social media?
So if you want to add it, it would be I have my comedy page, Georgia Kelley, on Facebook, and you can find me there.
And how do you spell your last name?
It's Kelley.
And yeah, if anyone wants to follow me, I'm at Comedy Brian, Brian, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. That's what we do.
And Brian, I just want to say thank you. It's been an honor to talk with you, and I'm so grateful that we got to meet 3 years ago, and it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Likewise. So glad that you're part of my life now, and thank you again for coming on today and sharing.